Yeah, so I have a workshop now. This is what's taking part 3 so long to get done. Well, let's get started.
At the end of the last part, we finished up assembling the logic portion of our Firefly remote. Now we've got one more thing to assemble before we can program our Esk8 and finally get to use our new remote, the receiver. This has been far and away the most annoying portion of the remote to assemble, almost entirely due to the lack of documentation regarding how to build it. There's been a few explanations on the build thread, but they're kind of hard to find, so I did all of that work for you. Here's the schematic someone posted on the forum regarding how to build the receiver. You can see here that the NRF radio board is wired up exactly the same as the remote itself. No changes there. But if we look at the other side of the Arduino, we can see a few things. First up, the PPM signal is sent through the D5 pin right here. To the left of that, we see our common ground, then two new pins that we need to use, the TX and RX pins. These are our UART connections to communicate with the Esk8 for our remote telemetry. Other than that, we've got our 5 volt and ground above that, and there is now a capacitor bridging the two. This capacitor is used to smooth out any power instability we might see from the Esk8 due to high current use during things like hill climbing. The image shows a value of 220 microfarads, but other users have had success with capacitors in the 100 microfarad range as well. The last thing that I'll mention that was not originally in this schematic is a ceramic 22 picofarad capacitor between the reset and ground. While not strictly necessary, I found that it prevents a certain glitch where the Arduino freezes when you turn on your board, so I include it in my builds. Recently though, a user over on the forum has found another fix with the MCP130 power management IC. It connects to the 5 volt, ground, and reset pins, and resets the Arduino in cases where power fluctuations may make the Arduino freeze or cause instability. Anyway, let's grab all the parts we're going to need, starting with the Arduino Nano V3, then our NRF radio board, 22 picofarad ceramic cap, 100 microfarad electrolytic capacitor, or 220 if you're using that, then our connectors for the Esk8. In my case, I'm using a 7-pin JST connector. The exact type is the 7-pin PH variant of the JST connector, if you need to find it. Ooh, pause for 1 second. Side note, I accidentally bought 100 of these JST connectors, so if you're building a Firefly and you forgot to buy one, message me over on the builders forum and I'll get you situated. Back to your regularly scheduled video. The other connector you'll need is a female motor servo cable, which I didn't have in my parts box, but looks just like this. Now, let's begin with the most time-consuming and tedious part of the assembly process, attaching the wires to the NRF board. Just like the remote, we'll be alternating the side the cable is connected onto to try and minimize any shorts. You can see here I have the red 3 volt power cable on the underside of the board, and the yellow on the top side. We'll just continue alternating sides for the first 6 pads, then skip one, that's the IRQ pad that we don't need, and then attach our ground cable on the last pad. When you're done, it'll look like so. Now, just like for the remote, we will wire up all the 7 cables in the same fashion. 3 volt to the 3v3, CE to 9, CS to 10, SCK to 13, MOSI to 11, MISO to 12, and then last but not least, our ground pad to the ground pin. With all the wires connected, you should still be able to access your USB port if you flip the board out of the way like this. Anyway, we'll move to our next component, the ceramic cap if you're using it. Now you'll see here that I am not putting it in the usual spot for reset and ground. We're actually going to take advantage of the extra pins available on the ICSP header. If you check the schematic for the Robotdyne Nano V3, which is what I'm using, you can see the header has a reset and ground pin available right at the top. This makes assembling the receiver so much easier since the radio board and the ceramic cap can have their own ground pins. So we'll put the ceramic cap on the ICSP header, give the leads a little bend to make sure they stay in place, and solder it down. give the excess a little trim, and that's done. Next up, we'll attach the JST connector for our uart telemetry. Now this guy has 7 wires coming off of it, but we only really need 2 of them. In the case of my connectors, you only need the green and orange cables. The rest of them can be clipped or just removed. Now, here you'll see me just using brute force to pull them out, but if you have a thumbtack, you can actually press down the little tabs that hold the wires in, and then they just pop right out. Here, you can get a very clear look at exactly which pins you need if your connector's colors don't match up to mine. If you're looking at the side of the JST with the little guiding pillars, you'll need the 2nd and 3rd pin from the left. Now to attach this to the Arduino, my cables go like so. The orange goes to the RX, and the green goes to the TX. But again, if your cables aren't the same colors as mine, it goes like this. The pin with 4 empty spaces next to it goes to the RX. The pin with only 1 space next to it goes to the TX. Now go ahead and solder those on like so. Next up, we've got our servo cable. We'll be doing this a specific way though, so please pay particular attention to this. The servo cable has 3 colors, black, red, and white, which are ground, 5 volt, and the signal ppm respectively. We're only going to do the white ppm signal first. The cable goes to the pin 5 of the Arduino. Give that a quick solder, and then comes our special instruction. Grab your 100 microfarad or 220 electrolytic capacitor and have your camera die while you're still recording. Then ship that receiver out to a customer that ordered it and make another one to continue your video. So, the electrolytic capacitor. It has 2 leads on it, a long one and a short one. The short one should be marked with a gray stripe on the cap itself to denote the side that needs to go to ground. The other lead will be going to the 5 volt pin. Now you'll see that the cap isn't perfectly sized to fit between those 2 pins, so I just give them a couple bends to make them fit nice and easy. Then you can give them a little bend to make it secure. Now, can you see why we didn't solder the servo connector, 5 volt, and ground yet? We're going to attach them to the same pins as the capacitor. Unfortunately, I don't have any good footage of how to do this, but I stripped the end of my cables and wrapped them around the base of the capacitor lead. Once again, red to the 5 volt pin, black to the ground pin. I found it's easier if you attach the capacitor first with just a tiny bit of solder before you try to attach the servo leads. This lets you bend the leads straight again to wrap the servo cables around them much more easily. Once you've attached the servo cables, you can trim the capacitor leads and your end result will look like so. And with that, congratulations, you've just completed the final part for your Firefly remote. The last things left to do are to program the remote and receiver with secure pipeline codes, calibrate your VESC settings, and get riding. So that's what we'll do in the next and final part of this build guide. Till next time, toodles!